Stay open and curious. The more curious you are, the more you're going to learn. The more interested you are, the more you're going to learn. If you approach these conversations with people, and that's all they are, that's what networking is. It's information gathering. Be interested, not interesting.
You're listening to Prospecting on Purpose, where we discuss all things prospecting, sales, business, and mindset. I'm your host, Sara Murray, a sales champion who's here to show you that you can be a shark in business and still lead with intentionality and authenticity. Tune in each week as we dive into methods to connect with clients, communicate with confidence, and close the deal. Tammy Gooler Loeb is the author of Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career that Fulfills You. As a speaker, career, and executive coach, she inspires people to build careers that are fulfilling and meaningful. For over 2 decades, Tammy has shared her expertise with audiences and clients, focusing on career transitions, networking, leadership strategies, and team development. Her methods motivate people to consider their career options, increase their communication effectiveness, and expand their networks to develop more satisfying professional relationships and meaningful opportunities. Tammy also hosts a weekly podcast, Work from the Inside Out, showcasing the inspiring stories and practical lessons of professionals who have made meaning transitions to more fulfilling careers. Tammy holds a BA in psychology from Hampshire College and an MBA from Boston University. Her expertise has been featured in Harvard Business Review Ascend, Forbes, Fast Company, and the Boston Globe. And now I feel so fortunate to have her join us on Prospecting on Purpose. Welcome to the show, Tammy.
Thank you, Sara. It's such a delight to be here with you.
I'm so looking forward to our conversation. And I love that you are a networking expert. And I'm excited to get into that because I am too. And one of my tactics for networking is to use random questions. So I'm just going to throw one at you.
Sure.
I know that you're based in Boston. If you had to relocate to another country for the rest of your life, you can have the same income, same job, but you have to move. You have to leave the US. Where would you go and why?
Oh, I love that question. Ooh, where would I go? Well, first, I probably would go somewhere where many people speak English because I've never been all that good with languages. I think I would like to go somewhere probably in the Mediterranean, but also with good access to a city. So there's probably lots of places that would fit the bill. I haven't been to Portugal, but I've heard wonderful things about it. I've been to Spain, France, Italy. I don't know that you're not going to get me to pick one place. I just know it.
If you pick Spain, then you're close to other countries, but
I've enjoyed visiting so many places that it would be difficult to choose. But I think someplace where the climate is really nice and I'd have access to a city and things. And yet I really enjoy the theater. So why not be close to London? But the weather there isn't as good. So
I know nowhere is perfect.
It's a great question, though. I love it.
We'll have to do like a retreat in Greece soon. So it's a little temporary trip.
That would be great.
Start manifesting that one.
Yeah.
Well, I want to just start by saying I really loved your book.
Oh, thank
and one
you.
piece that I thought was really so impactful, and I really got this theme throughout the book, is that you really do not have to do this all on your own. Like any type of major life change or career transition, you don't have to do it on your own.
Yeah.
The book gives you so many tools on how to get that support. So that was one of my biggest takeaways.
Yeah. As a coach, I receive a lot of inquiries from people who are in the midst of trying to figure out what they want to do next, or they've been laid off, or they're looking for their next job. And some of them have been thinking about it for a long time. They've tried to do a lot of things on their own, and somehow they thought they had to just buck up and do it by themselves. And they found themselves really struggling, and they thought, oh, what's wrong with me? Or how come I can't do my own resume or my own cover letters? And it's not that you can't, it's just that oftentimes you're so close to your own situation. It's hard to have any kind of, definitely impossible to have objectivity, but also just to even have enough of a perspective on your own experiences and all of that to be able to really craft the right kinds of materials you need, but also to keep the process going in a way that really enables you to keep your options open. I find that a lot of people start to close the walls in on themselves and limit their options. And so by having somebody else to talk to, or other people, or joining all kinds of networking groups and other groups out there that people come together who are also in similar situations, you start to see that everybody has different ideas to share, ways to encourage each other. It just makes a huge difference in terms of how you'll go about the process of figuring out what you want and seeking it. And it really is about keeping your options open for as long as possible, while also, though, getting focused in and putting one foot in front of the other. But to do it all alone, it ends up taking longer and being a lot harder that way.
That makes a lot of sense. You find the opportunity to share a little piece of yourself. You
Yeah.
may find that other people are going through the same thing. You have these connection points just by cracking that door open a little.
Absolutely. And yet I understand that, especially in the US, and I think it's true of other cultures as well, especially if we've been working for many years already, we feel like, well, I'm a professional. I should be independent, and I should this, I should that. And the minute you start saying I should, you know you're heading down the wrong path. And so it makes perfect sense, no matter what juncture you're at, no matter what happened when maybe you lost a job, it doesn't matter. Let that go and start just having conversations with people about what they're doing and what they're enjoying about their work or not enjoying, or what they like about the company they're working for, or the people they work with, or maybe even a past job that they've had that they've enjoyed. So it's not even a matter of having to show up in a certain way and tell people about yourself. I think that's what holds a lot of people back, is they think that they have to have some well-crafted elevator pitch or branding statement. Really, what you need to do is be curious about other people and allow all of the information you can get from other people's experiences to kind of marinate inside of you a little bit, and see what thoughts pop into your own mind about yourself and your own experiences. You'll start to see there's some parallels there. There might be some new ideas that pop up in your mind that you can start running with or asking more questions about, and it'll get you moving forward.
I think that that's really helpful. That's a really solid takeaway too, to kind of marinate on other people's pieces. And
Mhm.
can you give a description on what it means to work from the inside out?
This is something I really feel strongly about. How many times in our lives have we reflected on some 2020 hindsight, right? And we say, I should have listened to that little voice in my head that said this was the right direction to go in, or that would have been a better decision. But instead, I chose this path or that path because someone else said this would be better, or I was taught growing up that this was a better profession or a better set of choices, or someone said to me, well, that's not a real job. We've all had different messages given to us over the years that have been ingrained in us, oftentimes from very well-intentioned people. And then we start listening to all those messages that came from outside ourselves. And we're not listening to our own instincts, our own intuition, and our own inner knowing, because it doesn't feel as concrete as all the messages that we've been getting for years and years and years that have been ingrained in us. And so if we stop and just take a moment and listen to some of the messages that keep coming through from within ourselves, that have probably also been coming for years, then we would find ourselves actually making some better choices. There's been research that has shown this. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Blink, where he points to some research that shows that sometimes our first instincts or our first thoughts about something often take us in a direction that is definitely more rewarding and satisfying. We get better outcomes. That's one resource that people might want to look at. I find that when I've followed my own instincts, even after I've maybe struggled with them to some extent or gone into a state of angst over it, it usually ends up being the right decision. Sometimes it's a little painful to get there, but it usually is the right way to go. And so we really do have to listen to that.
Well, I appreciate you giving that description from you directly because I very much felt that reading through it. And I had a lot of personal aha moments of areas where I did follow my intuition, or some of the advice that you give is like, oh, okay, I didn't do that. And that's probably why I struggled for that chunk of time. And it's
Mhm.
funny to hear you talk about the outside influences and kind of this expectation from others. One thing that I picked up both in your podcast and on the book is you talk a lot about early childhood. What
Mm.
did you want to be as a child, or what type of conversations your parents had about their careers? Is that why you focus on that area so heavily?
Well, I was very fortunate. I grew up in a house where both of my parents did work that they really enjoyed, and we had dinners together almost every night, and they would talk about their work, and I was inspired by that. My dad was a school psychologist, my mother was a social worker, and they would talk about the people that they were working with, the people they were helping, and I always found it inspiring just by the nature of how they seemed to really embrace and respect the people that they were working with, and how, the kinds of outcomes they were able to achieve by doing that. And they always told me I could do whatever I wanted to do, that I was capable of doing that. So I always felt very encouraged in that way. Likewise, I know a lot of other people who I've coached, people I've just known in my life, who were encouraged, oh, you're very strong in math, or you're very strong in science. You should become a doctor, you should become an accountant, you should, and very well intentioned, very strong messages. And some of these people actually followed through and did that. And they woke up one morning, 38, 40 years old, 45, and realized, you know what? I don't really like what I'm doing. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean it's what you love doing. Oftentimes, people tend to go towards something that they're good at. And the other layer of the question that needs to happen is, okay, what am I good at? Great. Now, what will I enjoy doing? What will I love? And it's not exclusive of what can I make a living at? How can I support myself or my family? I'm not suggesting that people throw all caution to the wind and just go after their dream job in some flighty way. I am very practical. But I think that most people can both work off of their strengths and their innermost desires and interests and passions at the same time. For some people, they don't necessarily want to follow their passions, and maybe they have other hobbies or other things that they want to pursue in other ways. I'm not even suggesting that your work that you do for a living has to be that thing. But I think too often people compromise themselves, and they're not listening to themselves in that way to see what really suits me best. Who am I? And how can I live a life that's really genuine? And when you're raising children, as I was raised, you want to set that example for them. You want to show them that going to work can be a fulfilling and pleasant thing, not just something that you just do because you have to.
Right. Oh, your parents sound lovely. Just to orient the audience to the book, and it makes a lot of sense when you talk about your clients coming to you and some of the realizations that they're having. The book has the 9 different obstacles that people kind of encounter when making any type of focus on fulfilling and meaningful work. The way that you've structured it, you have 2 examples of individuals, and then at the end of each chapter you have a self-assessment and then resources. And it was almost like the gift that kept giving. Each time I was like, wait, there's more. But one of the things that I think I noticed in all of the different people's stories is that the careers, as they move through and try to focus on something that does give them more meaning, the skill sets still stack upon. One of your examples was a clergyman or a minister who then joins the FBI, but he was successful in his time in the FBI because he had that communication style. So when I think about career changes, and just going to say, I think the fear that I felt when changing, and I'm imagining this is common, you're in an industry for 15, 20 years. All of your network and your contacts are in that industry and your knowledge base. So leaving that is really scary. Is that something you see a lot, or what are other fears that come up?
Let's talk about that for a moment. So, because that's very important. So, A lot of people will say, oh, I've put all these years into nurturing these relationships in this field. How can I just walk away from all that? Well, it's like saying, well, why wouldn't you walk away from being less fulfilled or unhappy? It doesn't mean you have to walk away from all those relationships. The other thing that people do when they're getting ready to at least consider a change is they think they only have to turn to their network in the field that they've been in, when in fact, your network is actually a lot bigger than that. Your network is everybody you know. It could be your 75-year-old aunt. It could be your next door neighbor who works in a completely different field. It could be your cousin who lives halfway across the country who works for a whole different industry. Everybody knows somebody. And so if you're going to really spread your wings and think about some different options, you've got to talk to people who have different perspectives and different experiences. Likewise, you can also speak to those people who are in your industry, trusted people, of course, and say, I've really been rethinking the path I've been on. I'm thinking about doing something a little different. You've known me a long time. What do you know about me that really stands out to you? What are some key things that you could tell me about me that when you think about working with me that stand out? Get some data from the people who know you best. Learn something about yourself, but also learn something about them. Maybe you only knew them in your recent job. Find out, where were they before, or how did they get to where they are? For all you know, you could be sharing your thoughts about making a transition and find out that they too have had the same thoughts. Next thing you know, you could be setting up a weekly call with them to start comparing notes about how you're each exploring other options. Most of the time, when people start to get a little bit afraid to make that kind of a change, they think they're going from A to Z. Well, there's B, C, D, E, F, G, and all the pieces in between A and Z that they're not considering. And there's lots of information they don't have yet. So fear often comes up because you don't have the information you need. So you need to get more information. And the
Mm.
best way to do that is to talk to a wide variety of people. And when I said earlier, talk to your 75-year-old aunt, maybe your aunt or an uncle worked in a certain profession or happened to know a lot of people. We all know people in our lives who happen to know lots of different people. So it's not so much about worrying about that individual and what they know, but who else do they know? So you might start off a conversation, say, I'm looking to meet people who have been in jobs they've really enjoyed, or have worked for companies they've enjoyed working for, or I'm thinking about moving into a different industry and I'm looking just to talk to people who work in industries other than the ones I've worked in. Is there anyone you might recommend I speak with? Stay open and curious. Open and curious. It's one of the mantras I try to teach to my clients, is just stay open and curious. The more curious you are, the more you're going to learn. The more interested you are, the more you're going to learn. If you approach these conversations with people, and that's all they are, that's what networking is. It's information gathering. Be interested, not interesting, as Dale Carnegie said.
One of the things that I have two things that I want to talk about from that. That was great. One thing that I thought was really clever is it's not the like black or white, A to Z, all or nothing thinking. You can do like little pilot projects. This is kind of how I would refer to them. And this happened, I'm trying to think when this was, maybe 6 years ago. I've lived in Los Angeles. I have all these different ideas for like, TV shows. And I took a TV writing course, easy because I live here. And I go to this TV writing course and I walk in the door. There's probably 20 people here, dead silent. Nobody was talking. And I'm like very uncomfortable in that. I was like, hey guys, like, good morning. Just trying to talk to anyone. And everyone was keeping to themselves, super quiet, no collaboration. The guy taught 90 minutes. He went and disappeared for an hour break. Like it was just not, I was like, is this what a writer's room would be like? This is not for me. I need people that are going to chit chat, And so it was funny because that was like a little test. And I was like, okay, I got my knowledge. That's not for me. And I think that is something that you don't have to, I didn't need to quit my job and go try to be a TV writer, but I explored it, got my data points.
Exactly. I've done things like I've gone to adult ed courses, local community adult ed courses. You pay a small amount. I think I took a course once years ago about how to run your own bed and breakfast. I How many of us have fantasized about having our own bread and breakfast? Well, once I took the course, I realized, oh, yeah, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I don't blame you. That's hard.
And yet now I know a little bit about what it
Yeah,
takes to run a bed and breakfast. So when I go stay at one, I can really appreciate what it takes.
totally.
And there's so many free courses out there or low cost courses or people, the other thing that people don't realize is that your public library is an amazing resource. Reference librarians have ways of accessing information that the common person doesn't. And so depending on if you're near a big city or have access to a big city library, you can even ask. I know we have it here in the Boston area where I live. You can go to the Boston, anyone in Massachusetts can go to the Boston Public Library and ask a reference librarian in their business library to do a search for you on particular types of companies, and they'll send you these enormous spreadsheets loaded with all kinds of interesting information about companies and various people in companies and all kinds of things that you'd have to practically kill yourself to get, all in one place. So there's lots of different things that you can get your hands on to help you move forward in the process. But I think the piece that people really miss is that they're getting afraid because they don't know things, when in fact the real key is just go out and start getting information and learn what you can, and then take it from there step by step.
Well, the reference librarian is so interesting because you think about if you go to Google, if you don't know what you're Googling,
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to do there? So I think that's a really interesting tip.
Yeah, yeah, and a reference librarian might ask you the right kinds of questions, and then they will have be able to put their hands on references and things that, most of us don't even know exist or don't know how to use properly. These are public resources to us. It's great.
Well, and I think about when you talk about be open and curious and be interested in other people, I feel like that speaks to the thread of you don't need to go it alone.
That's right.
I have found in my journey, and I did this in sales too. If you need to get to a high profile client, but you don't know that person, okay, does this vendor or friend who I know, they worked with them, could they make an introduction for me? Like it very much in any type of career you're in, it's kind of connecting the dots to do your job efficiently. So you're taking those same skill sets for your own personal career.
Exactly. And when you think about asking somebody else for a little favor like that, some people get afraid to ask for favors.
Mhm.
And I always say, just turn the table around for a moment. If that person asked you for a favor, how willing would you be to do that for them? If the answer is absolutely, then turn the table back and ask for the favor.
That's a great reframe.
Yeah,
And I get it. It's uncomfortable to ask for things, but one of the tips that I do is I try to add value to the other person too.
absolutely.
Even if it's, hey, so and so, would you mind spending some time? I would also love to learn more about your business because I want to keep you in mind for my networking efforts. And it's a genuine request.
Absolutely. And sometimes you can just wrap up a conversation with somebody and say, this has been so helpful. Is there anything I can do to be helpful to you? And you don't have to do all the thinking for them. They can tell you if there's something that you can do to be helpful. I even tell that to younger people who think they
Mhm.
can't be useful to anyone because they're so young. But I say, you know what? It's not up to you to decide how you can be helpful. Let them, they'll be glad that you asked. That leaves a very nice impression.
Right. And you don't necessarily have to do anything, but you get that value add in that relationship. One of
Exactly.
the things that really hit me too in the book is you talk about scarcity mindset. And I think this is kind of on the same thread there is, and I would see this in sales a lot, fellow salesmen would hold all their relationships to their chest or they wouldn't share a mistake that they made. And I have found that if I was really open with my knowledge
Mm.
and sharing, it would come back to me tenfold. So can you talk a little bit about how you see scarcity mindset block people? Because that's one of the obstacles you discuss.
It comes through in a lot of ways. It comes through with even when someone says, I've put so much into this career, how can I walk away from it? Or the scarcity mindset of I'm making a certain salary. If I go to a new career, I'll have to start all over again. So there's a lot of assumptions about what it will look like if they make a change when they don't have the information yet to even know that. They have no basis for that. I mean, maybe they've seen somebody else who started all over again that way, or, oh, I'd have to go back to school. I don't want to pay tuition. Okay, well, that's a scarcity mindset. That's an assumption that you're going to have to pay tuition. That's an assumption that something, that you have to have certain kinds of resources or that you're going to have to take 10 steps back to take 3 steps forward. If that's not what you want to do, then get the information you need to figure out what you can do to not make that happen, or figure out what you can do to minimize that. But have more faith in yourself first to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I hear that too. I don't want to start all over. It's like, well, you're not starting from scratch, you're starting from experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, people think they're throwing their experience away. It's like, why? You're not.
Right. And a lot of the stories in the book, I think, illustrate that very nicely, like how the skills build and build and pivot and pivot. And I think one of the big takeaways that I had was, I think the quote you said is, careers are not formed in a straight line. And many of us were raised to believe that a life well lived is a linear succession of milestone and achievement.
Right.
You flip that on the head. It's like, hey, there's a ladder, but like, look all around the ladder, look over, under, around it.
That kind of thing that we were taught about the ladder or about the straight line, that used to apply a whole lot more. And so many of us were taught that that's the way it went, or people used to stay in the same job. My father was in the same job for over 30 years. That was not that unusual. The world has changed dramatically when it comes to the world of work. If you stay in the same job for 30 years, it's far more unusual in this day and age. You really have to be more flexible. You have to think more openly and with more curiosity, because the world is not, employers don't provide the stability that they used to provide. And I don't say that to be negative or to be scary. I say that because that's the reality. You really need to navigate things in a way that enables you to be empowered to make changes and be flexible when you need to be.
And I think that that speaks to building your network. Is that like, what would be one of, maybe can you give us like top three big punching items that we can like really sink our teeth into to like make sure that we're driving our career forward in a way that's
I
meaningful?
love that question. So, number one is remind yourself you're not alone and reach out to trusted people. Maybe you reach out to different people for different reasons. If you're feeling down or not sure of yourself, there are certain people you want to talk to. If you're wanting to reach out to people for more professional conversation, those are different people. But just don't get too isolated. The other thing that's very important is don't worry about the people that maybe you haven't talked to in 10 years because you've been busy building your life. Think about that, turning that table again. If that person reached out to you today, would you be happy to hear from them? Would you be glad they reached out to you? Turn the table back around and reach out to them. We are so fortunate that we live in a day and age when we can reach out and contact people that we haven't talked to in many years and easily get a hold of them. So don't worry about people you haven't talked to in a long time. They're not going to be having thoughts about you and that you haven't been in touch because they haven't been in touch either. Okay. So, and the other thing is once you land somewhere or you're on the path to something, be more mindful of keeping up with some of your contacts and your networks. It doesn't mean that you have to be constantly networking, but maintain those relationships in some way or another, because someone else is going to knock on your door looking for help as well. It's all reciprocal. So one of the biggest mistakes I see that people make is once they land somewhere, they stop maintaining the care and nurturing of their networks. And I think it does help for you to do that, because once you've landed somewhere, it might be that a few years down the road, you may be looking for your next thing, or somebody might have something that they want to offer you in a few years. That's the best way that people find their next role. It's usually through actually a third or fourth or even fifth degree connection. So oftentimes, if you're looking for your next role, it's usually through someone you may not even know right now. Very, very important. And take care of yourself. I hear people say all the time, job search is a 24/7 job. No, it's not. Life is a 24/7 job. If you're spending 24/7 looking for a job, you're probably not doing it that effectively. Give yourself a break, take care of yourself, and be a human being first, because that's who people hire. They hire human beings, not resumes, not buckets of skills. So know who you are and what you bring to the table as a human being first. They'll look at your resume and see what your skills are.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you for those 3 bullets. I feel the 10-year gap. I mean, when I started my business, I started reaching out to people that I hadn't spoken to, and 6 years, 7 years, 10 years. And I was amazed at the love and support that I got. And usually, just kind of adding on a little tip that has helped me is when I do reach out, I'll usually say, I learned this from you, and here's how I've used it in my career. And I mean, I've had people say I made their day. I reached out to an old mentor and I said, I'm using some of the stuff I learned from you in my workshop. Do I have your blessing? He's like, of course. Like, so it's been really, I think that's been one of the most lovely things. And then now, number 3, make sure that you keep up with your network. That is a new priority for me, even more so, because you just never know. And I think that keeps being proven over and over again.
Absolutely. Relationships make the world go round as far as I'm concerned. There's nothing more important. And that's both professionally, personally. There's tons of research that shows this too, in terms of how people find new opportunities. And it's not just about finding a job. This applies also to those of us who are self-employed. So it's a great pathway to finding things that are more satisfying and meaningful and fulfilling. So the worst thing we do is get in our own way.
Yeah. And that's the opposite of working from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I truly loved the book, Tammy. I had a
Thank
lot of
you.
takeaways from it. There were a lot of great tools. I think I'm a big journaler, and one of the pieces that I took away in the different sections is you said write in your journal what's going on, and then go back and look at it 2, 3 days later and see how you would respond to it. And I've never had that advice, and I think that is working from the inside out and learning how to be more in touch with your intuition. And I had so many nice takeaways from the book. So I highly recommend it. We will link it up in the show notes along with your podcast link. Outside of the book and the podcast, if people want to find you and work with you, what are other ways that they can work with you?
The best way people can find me is just type into Google Tammy Gooler Loeb. And even if you misspell it, I'm the only Tammy Gooler Loeb in the world. So you will find me. TammyGoolerLoeb.com. Find me on LinkedIn and tell me that you've heard this show and we can link in. I'm always happy to talk with people and see what they're needing. And, I go into organizations and work with teams as well. I'm all about people finding their more fulfilling and satisfying place in their work. It's not always about making a change. It's about oftentimes finding that part of yourself that can be more satisfied where you are too. So it's not always about making radical changes.
Or even within your same organization.
It can be a lot of fun, actually, to kind of reinvent right where you are.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for your time, Tammy. I loved our conversation, and I love having you in my network now.
Thank you, Sara. This has been delightful. You asked great questions. I know that your show is going beautifully, and I'm going to keep being a listener. So thanks.
Thank you. It's been really special. And it makes me, I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, I get to read business books, which I love and I do already, but then I get to talk to the person who wrote it and ask them questions.
Isn't it fun?
That to me is designing a life that is giving me a meaningful career. And I feel so grateful for it. So thank you for putting the content out there. Thank you for being a support of all of us on this journey. I think you're such a great resource and I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Prospecting on Purpose podcast. If you loved what you heard today, subscribe to the podcast and please rate and leave a review. For more info on me, or if you'd like to work together, feel free to go to my website, saramurray.com. On social media, I'm usually hanging out at Sara Murray Sales. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.